The world had entered a strange quietness that no one could explain. It was not the calm of peace nor the ordinary stillness of night. It was a deeper silence, unsettling, creeping into the background of daily life. Conversations felt hollow, eyes met and lingered too long, as if strangers recognized in each other something they could not name. People began to wake drenched in sweat, whispering words in languages that did not exist, clutching at images of endless stars fading behind their eyelids. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence. Social media turned it into comedy, newscasters referred to it as the global dream, and skeptics mocked it as mass hysteria. But the laughter dimmed when millions began drawing identical symbols, when children wrote strange equations in dirt and ink they could not possibly know, and when men and women began walking in the streets at night with vacant eyes, moving with unnatural synchrony. The first disasters were mistaken for human error. In South America, an experienced dam engineer reversed safety valves, unleashing floods that swallowed entire towns. He had no memory of doing it, only repeating in tears, "It wasn't me." In Europe, an air traffic controller guided two planes into the same airspace, watching without blinking as they collided in fire and steel. In Asia, power plant operators shut down reactors without reason, plunging millions into darkness. Everywhere, the same story repeated. Sabotage without motive, accidents carried out with precision by people who had no recollection of their actions. Neurologists studying patients noticed synchronized brainwave spikes across entire populations. Something external was influencing thought itself. Governments scrambled. Laboratories shielded in reinforced basements recorded frequencies that should not exist. It was not radio, not microwave, not anything measurable. It was a rhythm, a pulse felt more than heard, resonating directly with the folds of the human brain. Experiments confirmed it. Volunteers exposed to the mysterious hum began to lose control of their hands, their words, their thoughts. They twitched, chanted, obeyed commands that no one had spoken aloud. Scientists recoiled at the implications. Humanity was no longer alone in shaping its mind. Theories multiplied. Some said solar flares were mutating cognition. Others insisted it was mass psychosis. Conspiracy theorists shouted about secret weapons. But reality struck when astronomers in Nevada detected a signal, precise, repeating, unearthly, originating from deep space. It matched the brainwave frequencies recorded worldwide. This was no hallucination, no trick of atmosphere. Someone, beyond Earth was reaching across light years to seize the human mind. There were no ships in the sky, no alien armies descending in thunder. Yet cities rioted as crowds chanted words unknown to any linguist. Leaders made incomprehensible choices, turning against their nations. Soldiers dropped weapons, staring at the heavens with trembling hands. Humanity had never been so powerless, and yet it had never been so obviously targeted. The control was not total, at least not at first. The aliens were careful, subtle. They selected individuals whose actions had consequences. An engineer here, a politician there, a scientist in a crucial program. The world bent under small fractures until entire systems crumbled. Stock markets crashed. Food distribution halted. Planes fell silent in skies. It was conquest without war, a dismantling of civilization by whispers. And still most people refused to believe. They blamed governments, corporations, hidden elites, anyone but themselves. Meanwhile, the alien grip tightened. Then came the first reports of resistance. In villages and hospitals, doctors and families noticed anomalies. Certain individuals did not dream the alien dreams. They did not chant, did not march, did not bow. Their brainwaves remained unsynchronized, out of step with the forced rhythm. Some were genetic outliers whose frequencies simply did not match. Others were monks who had spent decades training their minds to resist intrusion. Some were survivors of trauma, their neurology altered by scars invisible but powerful. Whatever the cause, these people stood untouched amid chaos. At first, they were dismissed as lucky. Then they began finding each other. Scattered across continents, using encrypted networks and whispered contacts, they connected. Soldiers who disobeyed alien commands, scientists who recorded the difference in their minds, ordinary citizens terrified but awake. They called themselves nothing grand, only the remembered, because they remembered what it felt like to belong to themselves. In abandoned warehouses, they built crude shielding devices, cages of copper and iron that weakened the signal long enough to wake entranced victims. It was clumsy and dangerous. Some rescuers were pulled into the alien rhythm the moment they touched the afflicted. Others succeeded, dragging confused men and women back into awareness, only to watch them relapse when the signal surged again. But even these small victories mattered. For the first time, the aliens met resistance. The world outside descended deeper into ruin. Prophets emerged in streets, declaring the alien voice divine. Millions followed them willingly, surrendering to what they thought was enlightenment. Governments fractured, armies disbanded, economies collapsed. Technology became useless when human operators were compromised. Cities flickered with half-functioning power, streets filled with chanting mobs. And yet, under the cover of disaster, the remembered worked. They taught themselves to recognize the early signs of control. The vacant stare, the twitch in the hands, the murmured syllables. They trained their minds with mental exercises, repeating phrases, visualizing barriers, practicing focus until their skulls throbbed. They discovered that creativity, drawing, singing, imagining stories, dulled the alien grip. Logic and reason bent easily, but chaos and invention seemed to confuse the invaders. The first time they intercepted a clear alien transmission, it was not words but hunger. A wave of emotion slammed into their equipment, so strong that even the immune staggered. It was pure craving, vast and endless, as if the universe itself longed to consume. The aliens were not invaders seeking land or resources. They were predators feeding on consciousness. Each synchronized chant, each controlled act drained the human spirit, siphoning energy across space. Earth was not a battlefield. It was a feast. The remembered realized their importance. They were anomalies, yes, but they were humanity's last defense. No technology could stop an enemy that attacked thought itself. Only the stubbornness of a mind refusing to yield could fight back. They did not see themselves as heroes. Many were terrified, barely clinging to sanity. Yet they endured because endurance was all they had. One group in Eastern Europe managed to wake an entire village for 3 hours before the signal reclaimed it. Another in South America destroyed a broadcast tower, unknowingly amplifying the alien rhythm. Small victories scattered across the globe, like sparks in darkness. The aliens tightened their grip, yet the sparks refused to go out. Meanwhile, ordinary people noticed strange changes. Dreams grew more vivid. Families lost loved ones not to death, but to absence as fathers and mothers wandered into cities, never to return. Children wept at night, whispering of voices calling them from the stars. Doctors gave up trying to treat the entranced. Medicine could not reach what had been stolen. Some nations surrendered entirely, leaders openly welcoming the alien guides. Others fought futilely, turning weapons against their own citizens in panic. Humanity teetered on the edge of collapse. In the midst of despair, a pattern emerged. The aliens had limits. They could not control everyone at once. Their grip was strong but scattered, focused through chosen channels. And while their hunger was vast, it was not infinite. They fed in waves, surging, then retreating to gather strength. During these lulls, the remembered moved quickly, rescuing, recording, building. They were not strong, but they were cunning. And cunning was a weapon the aliens had not anticipated. The most haunting discovery came from a dying scientist in Japan, one of the remembered. With trembling hands, he played back the final data his instruments had captured. The alien signal mirrored human thought almost perfectly, as though designed for it. It was not adaptation. It was preparation. The aliens had known humanity's neural patterns before humanity had even discovered them itself. Whether by ancient surveillance or by design, humanity had been chosen long ago. Earth was not an accidental target. It was a preordained harvest. The scientist whispered before death, "They think we are food, but food does not fight back." His words spread quietly through the remembered, becoming a mantra. They were prey, but prey with teeth. Prey capable of rebellion. And while the rest of humanity drifted deeper into enslavement, a handful of stubborn, terrified, scarred survivors carried the spark of defiance. They did not know how to win. They did not know if winning was possible. But they knew one truth that the aliens had underestimated. Humans did not kneel willingly. Even enslaved, even broken, even drowned in voices not their own, a human heart still whispered, "I am me." That whisper, fragile as it was, could grow into a storm. The storm had not yet begun, but the first winds stirred. The aliens had shown their hand, and humanity had begun, however faintly, to push back. The world had fallen into darkness, yet in that darkness, resistance was born. And though their numbers were few, though their strength was brittle, the remembered carried something the aliens could never command. They carried memory, will, imagination. They carried humanity itself. The collapse came faster than anyone expected. Once the alien influence reached a critical mass, society unraveled with terrifying speed. Supply chains that had taken centuries to perfect collapsed in weeks. Crops rotted in fields as farmers walked away in silence. Power grids flickered off as technicians abandoned stations. Satellites drifted unmonitored. No law, no treaty, no military force could counter an enemy that needed no weapons, only access to the human brain. Families watched their loved ones transform into strangers who stared into the sky with glazed eyes, waiting for instructions that came from light years away. Governments tried to maintain order, but leaders were among the first to fall, their decisions driven by alien whispers. Orders grew contradictory, meaningless, suicidal. Armies broke apart, not because of battle, but because soldiers looked at their commanders and saw empty vessels speaking with borrowed voices. The world became a patchwork of chaos. Some regions sank into complete alien control, their populations moving like puppets in eerie synchronization. Others resisted desperately, barricading cities, cutting off communication, refusing to let the whisper spread. But isolation only delayed the inevitable. The signal was not bound by wires or waves. It was something more insidious, reaching into the most private corners of the mind. Even hidden underground, even in bunkers lined with metal, people woke from dreams with new orders imprinted in their thoughts. And yet, despite the suffocating grip, there remained those who resisted. The remembered, the immune, were few, but they were growing more organized. In the ruins of cities, in mountain caves, in abandoned stations, they gathered, determined to transform survival into defiance. They studied patterns in the alien control, discovering rhythms in the surges. The invaders did not act continuously. They fed in cycles, exerting overwhelming pressure for days, then receding as if catching breath. In these pauses, the remembered struck. They infiltrated controlled zones, rescuing those who could still be awakened, dragging them into makeshift shelters, training them in mental resistance. They built crude devices that scrambled brainwave synchronization, far from perfect, but enough to buy precious hours of freedom. More importantly, they discovered that resistance was contagious. When one mind refused the alien command, it created disturbances in the collective control. A single defiant thought could ripple outward, destabilizing the control of others nearby. Humanity's unpredictability, its refusal to be uniform, became a weapon. The aliens noticed. Their responses grew harsher. Instead of subtle manipulations, they unleashed mass commands, forcing entire cities into riots or marches that destroyed infrastructure. Controlled populations hurled themselves against barricades with suicidal determination. The remembered fought back, but for every victory they carved, entire regions disappeared into alien silence. It was not only a battle of numbers but of time. The aliens fed constantly, draining the will of billions. Every day they grew stronger while humanity shrank. Yet within the despair, there were discoveries that changed everything. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of Berlin, scientists among the remembered uncovered recordings of the alien signal. It carried structure, a form of language, layered into its rhythm. By filtering out harmonics, they reconstructed faint images, towering beings of light and shadow, their forms indistinct, their faces hidden. They were not gods, though they encouraged humans to worship them as such. They were predators, sophisticated but parasitic, surviving by consuming consciousness. They had no art, no invention, no culture of their own. They moved across galaxies feeding on civilizations, leaving behind husks of worlds drained of identity. Humanity was their next banquet. The discovery confirmed the worst fears. The aliens were not here to negotiate or share knowledge. They were here to harvest. But the recordings revealed something else, a weakness. In one sequence, a surge of human defiance disrupted the alien signal. When crowds resisted commands by creating noise, singing, chanting their own words, the alien influence faltered. The invaders thrived on control, on order, on synchronization. Chaos confused them. Spontaneity disrupted their grip. Creativity, the very essence of human unpredictability, was poison to their system. It was not a weapon of steel or fire, but it was something only humans possessed. Armed with this knowledge, the remembered began to fight in new ways. They organized resistant communities around art, around expression, around defiance of thought. Painters covered walls with chaotic patterns to block alien focus. Musicians played rhythms that disrupted the whispers. Writers spread stories that stirred the imagination, pushing minds beyond the alien leash. Resistance camps rang with laughter, tears, arguments, songs. It was messy, illogical, but it worked. People who engaged in chaos resisted longer, their minds harder to bend. The aliens retaliated with more brutal waves, consuming entire regions in silence. But each time they struck, the remembered adapted, spreading their strange weapons of unpredictability wider. The war was no longer hidden. Everyone on Earth knew they were under siege. Entire cities broadcast defiance, while others surrendered willingly, convinced the aliens were saviors. Battles were fought not with weapons but with will. Controlled humans hurled themselves at the free, creating carnage. The remembered killed when they had to, but they tried to awaken as many as possible, because every reclaimed mind was another fighter in the war for existence. Small bands of survivors crossed hostile territories, smuggling people to safe zones where creativity burned brightest. Children became weapons of resistance, their imaginations impossible for aliens to predict. Even simple drawings or songs carried power against the order imposed by the invaders. The aliens grew more desperate. They unleashed waves of synchronized despair, forcing millions to abandon hope, collapsing into catatonia. The remembered answered with defiance, spreading messages of endurance. Humanity had faced extinction before, through plague, famine, war, and had always clawed its way back. This enemy was different, unseen, overwhelming, but it too could be resisted. Across the planet, acts of defiance multiplied. A teacher led her students in a chorus that shattered an alien surge. A soldier resisted commands long enough to destroy a broadcast node. A mother whispered stories to her children until the whispers in their dreams faded. Each act was small, but together they became a movement the aliens could not fully suppress. But the invaders adapted as well. They stopped working only through the void and began manifesting projections, images in the skies, illusions of divine figures urging obedience. They promised peace, power, salvation to those who submitted. Many fell willingly into their grasp, seeing gods where there were only parasites. Humanity was divided, not by borders but by choice, to resist and endure chaos, or to surrender and vanish into silence. The remembered fought not only against alien power, but against their own species, against neighbors and loved ones convinced that submission was salvation. The war for minds was not only physical or psychic, but moral. Then came the Great Assault. The aliens focused their full strength on Earth, unleashing waves that synchronized nearly half the population in a single moment. Entire continents fell silent, their populations moving in eerie unity. Resistance camps were flooded with attackers who once were allies. The remembered fought with desperation, their crude devices and chaotic defenses barely holding. Cities burned, rivers filled with bodies. Humanity teetered on the edge of annihilation. But even then, the spark of defiance refused to die. In the ruins, survivors continued to create, to imagine, to resist. The aliens could crush bodies, but every time they tried to crush minds, new thoughts slipped through the cracks, wild and ungovernable. It was during this darkest moment that the greatest discovery was made. In a laboratory hidden beneath the Canadian tundra, scientists recorded the alien energy patterns as they surged. The parasites did not simply control, they mirrored. They echoed human thought to bend it back against itself. They were incapable of originating anything new. They could only feed on what already existed. This was their strength, but also their flaw. Against predictable order, they were unstoppable. Against chaos, invention, and creativity, they faltered. Humanity's unpredictability was not weakness. It was survival. The realization spread across resistance networks like wildfire. The aliens had underestimated their prey. Humans were irrational, contradictory, self-destructive, yet also imaginative, inventive, and stubborn. It was not advanced technology that would save them, but the one thing the invaders could never copy: the ability to dream. Even in despair, humanity dreamed, and those dreams could not be chained. The storm of domination that swept the planet reached its peak, but like every storm, there were cracks forming in its foundation. The aliens had thrown everything into one overwhelming surge, determined to silence the last flickers of resistance. Entire cities marched in perfect rhythm, their populations enslaved by a force that lived inside their skulls. The synchronized masses built monuments to their unseen masters, colossal structures of stone and steel designed not for utility but for obedience. Yet in the shadows between these monuments the remembered endured. Their bodies were broken, their numbers diminished, but their defiance remained unbroken. Across the world, small clusters of survivors carried fragments of knowledge, and with them, fragments of hope. The scientists who had discovered the parasite's inability to originate began to refine their work. They had realized the aliens' entire system was parasitic, relying not just on minds to feed from but also on patterns to exploit. If humans could generate chaos deliberately, not in small bursts but in vast orchestrated waves of unpredictability, then the aliens' grip might collapse under the weight of what they could not process. This required more than survival. It required unity on a scale that seemed impossible for a fractured species. Leaders emerged not from governments, for those had long since been corrupted, but from among the defiant. Soldiers who had broken commands, teachers who had protected students, artists who had turned defiance into fire, all became voices in a new chorus. They spoke not of borders, not of nations, but of humanity itself. They spread one message: the only way to survive was to be unpredictable together. They called it the Great Disruption, a plan to unleash chaos so vast it would overload the alien system. Preparation was brutal. Safe zones were fortified, not with weapons but with instruments, with paint, with words. Resistance networks broadcast music into the void, carried signals across broken satellites, urging humanity to awaken their imaginations one last time. Painters created murals that covered entire districts. Drummers beat rhythms that echoed across mountains. Poets whispered verses into the ears of sleepers, seeding their dreams with rebellion. Every act of expression became a weapon. The aliens countered with crushing waves of silence, forcing populations into motionless obedience. But silence could not erase what had already been planted. In the midst of this, a new discovery changed everything. Deep within the neural recordings of enslaved humans, researchers found traces of alien dependence. The parasites could not exist without a host. When a controlled mind resisted for too long, the alien signal wavered, faltered, and in rare cases collapsed entirely, leaving the human free. It was not permanent, but it proved the parasites were not gods. They were fragile without prey. For the first time, the idea spread that the aliens could be starved. If enough people resisted at once, if enough minds turned against the invaders, the entire swarm might crumble. The aliens sensed the danger. They lashed out with horrifying cruelty. Controlled humans were ordered to destroy libraries, museums, theaters, any place where imagination might live. Fires consumed centuries of history. Masterpieces of art turned to ash. Voices of defiance were silenced with brutal efficiency. Yet every destruction only fueled more resistance. Survivors carried fragments of burned books, shards of paintings, melodies remembered in their hearts, and rebuilt them in the shadows. Humanity clung to creativity not as luxury, but as survival. The Great Disruption began not with a battle but with a whisper. In small towns, in hidden camps, in underground stations, people refused commands. They sang when ordered to march. They laughed when ordered to kneel. They painted walls with wild colors when ordered to erase. These sparks spread faster than the aliens could smother them. Resistance cells coordinated their timing, launching waves of chaos simultaneously across continents. Millions of unpredictable acts struck like lightning, too scattered, too irrational for the alien system to contain. Cities erupted in defiance, not with weapons but with thought. The parasites faltered. Their synchronization wavered. The perfect rhythm of enslaved populations broke apart as humans began to resist in unison. Alien projections stuttered, their illusions flickering as if uncertain. For the first time since the invasion, the silence that blanketed half the world cracked with noise, shouting, singing, laughter, defiance. The aliens recoiled, surging with new force to regain control. They poured their energy into breaking the will of billions, forcing people to tear at each other in madness. Entire regions descended into chaos, not the defiant kind but the destructive kind the parasites could harness. The remembered knew they had only a narrow window before the invaders adapted, so they unleashed everything. Broadcast towers were reactivated to transmit defiance across frequencies. Musicians gathered in ruined stadiums to create symphonies of resistance. Children scribbled chaotic drawings and plastered them across walls. Writers read aloud stories of impossible futures, planting seeds of imagination too wild to be consumed. Humanity became a storm of chaos, a living organism fighting back with the one weapon no parasite could digest, the refusal to be predictable. The aliens convulsed under the strain.